thank you for tuning in to episode number not sure. We do appreciate it, and we're glad we got this far. I think what's amazing is it'd be really good to kind of get some more info from the listeners, kind of see how they're doing. You know, any stories they want to drop on us. We love to hear your listener stories, your listener tales, and let us know how your procurement journey is going. Because Luke 10's not really done much since we started recording, so he's like trying to kick a slug. Not much happens. So yeah, if you've had a bit more of an exciting time, then just reach out to us on our socials. The email is in the description as always, because it is kind of a weird one. So I think when we drop the email vocally, it's not quite memorable, is it? It's 2lukes1sip@gmail.com.
Yeah,
2lukes1sip@gmail.com. I don't know where you got the inspiration for that, but that's a great email address in my opinion.
Yeah. So it's the number 2, Luke's plural, and number 1, CIP. And as you mentioned there, we do have our socials as well. So you're the socials man. What are the tag? What are they called? Lines? No, that's
Mate,
not.
This is why our socials suck, because we don't even know what they're called. I think it is Let's Talk Procurement on the Instagram. We are on YouTube as well, although not much happens on there. So, check it out and then give us some feedback, slag it off, because it is terrible. And then, so Luke 10 he's not just a referee, he's also a fan of a particular club that might have a certain reputation. And when I gave him the keys to our Twitter/X account, I think he forgot that he was logged in, and now he's just resharing photos from that particular club, and I think their reputation is not great.
It's when we were going through a period of losing quite a lot of games, and the manager was in danger of being sacked. I was in favour of the manager going, so I was liking other people saying they wanted him to go, and now all that comes up on our Twitter feed is posts from the club, and the same sort of people saying that kind of stuff. But anyway, if you want to find out what the club is, evidence might still be there. The Twitter is @2lukes1sip. So like the email, but just on Twitter. And I've just seen as well now on my phone, you sent me a WhatsApp. Do you want to tell the listeners what you said in that message?
Yeah. So at the time of recording, we scheduled this for 10:15 in the was it 10:15? Yeah, 10:15 in the morning, and it got to 10:20, sort of 10:20ish, and there's no Luke 10. So I sent him a text saying, "Wake up, slag."
Damn.
Basically, just because it's a weekday and he's asleep. So
any day, I'm awake by that time, ready to go.
Yeah. Should we drift into the bulletin? See what's up?
Yeah. Okay. So the first, we talked about socials already, but the first thing that I wanted to say was, for people listening on anything, they can't see obviously the video. They don't know. They don't have a mental picture of the rooms that we are recording in. So I was wondering if we should do like a description of where we're sat right now, in terms of what does it look like. So Luke 1, I'm looking at his screen now. So behind him, he's got some what are they? Some pink fluffy handcuffs behind you.
What? Sorry.
Oh, so was you not meant to? He's hiding them now. He's putting them away. No, he's got a very respectable white-walled background with a door.
That's real life, by the way. It's not a fake background. This is my.
Not fake.
No.
What's that plant you've got in the corner?
I don't actually know what that plant is, but I do love a plant, and I've got lots of different plants scattered around the room.
Do you have a name for the plant, or are you a normal person?
I name all of my plants, and the one you can see there is called Spiky.
Spiky, okay, I see that. I see that.
Yeah, because it's got spikes. But interestingly, so I got married a couple of years ago, and we bought a giant jumbo cactus to celebrate. I'm talking like probably a 4.5-foot cactus, and
She wanted a ring, you wanted a 4-foot cactus.
100%. And we settled on the cactus, and unfortunately, it passed away over the weekend.
Oh no!
Wow. I think it caught a draft or something, and it just out of nowhere, absolutely out of nowhere. It was nice and solid the week before, and then gone. So that's some sad news from the household.
Maybe we should do an LTP cactus funeral.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Send in your condolences, because the wife's really upset. To be honest, I'm still trying to get over it. It was meant to symbolise our marriage, and it's dead after 2 years, so it's not a great sign, is it?
Oh no. Yeah, maybe if next week you're really depressed and you're a different person, we'll know that it's not just the plant that has faded.
Yeah, and speaking of that sort of thing, I mean, look, listeners, we know that mental health is a big topic, and we're very much both mental health advocates. If you do follow us on Instagram, you'll see that we are now a proud supporter of a group called Men Who, and it's aimed at effectively not curing, but helping beat loneliness amongst men. We, struggle for friendship, especially after leaving school and all of that good stuff. So I won't go too much into it now, but we are going to have the founder on for a sort of introduction to kind of talk through and see how we can help each other out. So that's another little bit of news there.
No, that would be good to get them on the podcast and talk about the company, because it sounds like such a great idea, and hopefully we can promote it and grow it into more of a bigger thing, so it can help more people.
Brilliant. So before we drift on to today's subject, I thought I'd do my usual, end the bulletin with a cheeky bit of bants. So what do they call a robot who loves to eat noodles?
What?
The Ramenator.
Brother.
Surely, because it's like the Terminator, but he loves to eat ramen.
I think my horse one's better.
Do you understand why that joke was the joke I picked today?
Is it because the Terminator is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you're going to tell me that I look like him with my big muscles?
Yeah, you kind of look like a thumb with glasses on today.
Thank you.
No, Terminator is linked or sounds very similar to a topic that is close to my heart. It's not really that close to my heart, but and it's all about contract termination. So I think we should really get into today's topic. How do you feel about that? Before we go into the word termination, can you think of kind of ways that a contract will end once you've entered into it? And obviously termination is probably a clue.
Well, when the services are finished and it reaches the end date. Did you want me to go through multiple?
No, that's it. Yeah, that's good. For a contract to end, there's kind of multiple options. Termination is a big part of it, which we'll dive into. The other ones are for actually just completion of the contract, like you say. So everything that was set out in the contract has been completed, concluded, and the exchange has taken place between both parties. So, we've had your services, we paid you for your services, everyone's happy, and that's it. It's the natural end of the contract, and that's probably the best way a contract can end, because everyone's happy, job's done, and then you can close the chapter and move on. It's the end of the natural kind of life cycle of a contract. However, there are many a situation where that isn't the case, where we're not happy, which takes us on to today's topic, termination. What is contract termination to you? Luke 10, level 4 SIPS holder, unbelievable referee,
Yep.
and an ultra to this channel.
2 out of the 3 are correct. I forgot the question.
What is contract termination to you, Luke 10?
contract termination is when both parties agree to end the contract.
Are you sure they agree?
No.
So hang on, let's just take the agreement bit out of your definition then.
Both
Try that again.
parties end the contract.
Brilliant. Nice stab at that. Yeah.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, not bad effort. Sips will probably give you 4 marks for that because sympathy. So, it's the process of ending a contract, right? Correct. Well done. Before the obligations within it have been fulfilled by all of the parties. So, effectively, it's before you reach the completion date and having everything delivered.
Yeah. So the end date of a contract, if a contract gets to the end and it's not renewed, it just ends. That doesn't mean it's terminated.
No, that's just a natural end of the contract. It's not been forcefully terminated. Okay, so contracts would normally say, here's the duration up until, I don't know, June 2024. The end of June 2024, this contract will naturally lapse unless people renew it, or both parties renew it. So if a contract is terminated, the parties will be freed from their responsibilities and obligations under the contract. Okay. Now, a lot of the clauses might stipulate the rules around accepting the termination request or the termination trigger.
Yeah. So that could be a number of things, like if a supplier goes into administration, or I don't know what other things there could be. Something like that, basically, when there's a financial reason for the contract to end.
Yep. So we'll look at kind of some common reasons. I mean, there's quite a lot of reasons that are built in that you might want to consider for termination. The most popular one, I think, when we build out a contract is there being a breach of the particular contract. So what we determine as a breach could be different. So we might have set out different rules of the contract. So let's say our contract stipulates that you have to use you have to use domestic resource, so you have to use UK resource for the purposes of delivering this work, and they have to be security cleared. Now, if we find out that our supplier has sent some work overseas and it's been delivered by offshore resource, that's a breach of one of the obviously the requirements of the contract, and we would be within our right to trigger that termination.
So would you have to say that up front if you breach this specific term and call the term out? That means a breach. It doesn't just apply to everything in the contract.
It does. So anything that's expressly written in the contract, if that has not been followed, then it's a breach of the contract. Now, the bit that gets interesting is whether or not it's deemed severe enough to trigger the termination clause. So something like sending something offshore when everything was supposed to be onshore. Now that is, in my opinion at least, a fairly severe breach of contract. So it would warrant termination. Now, if one of the clauses stipulates that they have to have a modern slavery policy and it has to be up to date and in accordance with XYZ, and it has to be provided on request. If the supplier can't provide it on request and they deliver it 2 or 3 days late or whatever, am I going to terminate a contract and all their services because provision of the policy was a couple of days late? Probably not.
Is that a material breach? This is digging through the depths of my brain here, but I've heard that phrase mentioned.
Yep. Yeah. So that's right. What we would consider material, relevant enough to basically warrant us to want to stop the work. That would be the first example, obviously not the social value thing.
So have you got a definition for material breach?
Well, you're the one I like to guessing the definitions, you know.
Okay.
So
a breach of the contract obligations that has a significant impact on the performance on the delivery?
Yeah, I think that's fair. If I look at what the legal firms would say, because that's probably the best way to define it, right? Because law is kind of black and white. Is a material breach is one that substantially defeats the purpose of the contract, or relates to an essential element of the contract and deprives the injured party of a benefit that he or she should reasonably expect. Fairly good, right? Yeah. So termination for a breach of contract is something that is we almost call it a boilerplate condition in our terms and conditions. You would expect it to be in there. No party enters into a contract expecting that they are going to breach it. So obviously you would only commit to what you believe you can fulfill. And both parties are typically happy to commit to that. Another example is that the performance of the contract is no longer possible. How do you feel about that?
Is that contract frustration?
It is a bit of frustration, yeah. Yeah, contract frustration. That is actually an official term as well, so I'm impressed. Nicely done.
Me.
Well done, you. Yeah. 2 points to Gryffindor. There you go, Potter. Nicely done.
Thanks, Dumbledore.
Call me Dumbledore, because I'm the daddy. Oh, who said that? Who said that? Let's not include that. Mate, this is mic issues, and now I'm unhinged. It's crazy. Yeah, so performance of the contract's no longer possible. There is a frustration. Sometimes a change in legislation or a change in that company's position may mean that they cannot meet their obligations altogether. So it's kind of interesting because you might actually want to maintain a relationship with the supplier. So you might just agree that actually we'll just terminate it due to the fact that you can no longer meet those obligations.
So in terms of like a real life experience, say for example, if you bought a phone contract and then there was a lightning strike on a mobile data tower near you, so your area couldn't have any signal, could you then agree to terminate the contract through contract frustration?
So what you're asking me there is, does force majeure fall into frustration, I think? Well,
just adding terms. Force majeure?
I think so, yeah. So force majeure is it started as what is deemed as acts of God. So that might be something that you'll see written in, and it's something that is unpredicted, unforeseen, and out of the control of both parties that will effectively then stop a party being able to deliver their obligations. So think of things like hurricanes, floods, lightning strikes, COVID. Well, that was an interesting one. Originally, so some contracts were worded in a way that would say, viral diseases and things like that, whereas other ones were silent on it. Some companies put in there like, power failures, and actually you probably want to be striking that out of that clause, because a power failure effectively is in their gift to control. They can have a backup power generator, they could have a secondary supply, they could have an off-site option as well.
So you're saying they're writing things in there. Sorry, are they writing things in there to say these are examples of things that would count as force majeure, or are they saying these are examples of things that wouldn't count because we've written them down as they might happen?
Yes. So under the force majeure clause, they will say this is what it will often say something like, this is acts of God, including but not limited to. And it'll say floods, lightning, mass disease, some stuff like that, and it will kind of go into it. Some of them are not as well written, and they will literally just be like force majeure, any act of God.
Which is a weird. The first option is a bit of a weird concept, isn't it? Because you're saying with force majeure it's an unforeseen event, but then you're calling out what the unforeseen events could be. Just like,
Yeah.
oh, we're not expecting this, including this, and this. So
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to go on the reason that, so for example, if you need to deliver a project in 2 weeks' time, and then all of a sudden the volcano down the road erupts, takes out your office, like, yes, you didn't know it was, you thought it might erupt at some point, but you didn't know it was going to be today.
In those 2 weeks, yeah.
And in that case, you can't do a 2 weeks delivery anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, force majeure is an interesting one. I always like to have a read and see what they've kind of called out as their force majeure things, because sometimes they do try and sneak, suppliers can try and sneak additional things in that are disaster events, but they're not necessarily something you can't mitigate against.
So if we're thinking about non-procurement stuff, real life applications in the frustration, breach, force majeure sections, what should people be looking out for?
What do you mean? I feel like you've got something in your head, like a scenario.
I was just thinking in terms of like when you're going to sign up to a rent contract, what should you be looking for in those sections? And so what would good look like, basically? What would you want to see?
That's a question I don't know I have the answer for, mate, to be honest. Without a rent contract, I'm not sure I can, without looking at one, I can't really, comment on what is good and what's not. But it would have to be reasonable. I mean, when you look at property, so for example, do you live in a flood zone? Because if the house is in a flood zone or a flood risk area, even if you're like 3 miles away and it's really, really unlikely the river's never flooded in 200 years, you're going to be paying a premium. You're going to have to put a bigger deposit down to get the banks comfortable with lending money to you, because they're not willing to take the risk that you might not be exposed to a flood. You're then also going to have to pay a premium on insurance, because they're going to say, well, you're going to get flooded every other year, so we'll need you to stump up for that. So things like that. I mean, it's not really force majeure, but that's how something that is an act of God could potentially influence you in a sort of property market. But I do think that's a good shout for an everyday Dave. Actually, we can grab a rental contract from somewhere. We can try and source one, and we can review it. We can redline it, as we like to say. And the other one for termination is that people just want the contract to end. So if you can just agree that you want the contract to end early, it might be the right time. And a really good example with this is employment. So it might not be working out between you and your employer, and they've said, well, look, we're not going to fire you. We just want to have a mutual termination. Your end date will be XYZ. See you later.
So that's what it means when sports managers, for example, football managers say, oh, it's a mutual agreement between...
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
it probably
they've agreed.
Rarely is, but on paper, it's a mutual agreement to terminate.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're doing that, it stops it being ugly one way or the other. So if the football club were to sack the manager, obviously they might have to pay compensation for the rest of the contract. And if the football manager was to just leave, then he wouldn't get his compensation. So he's less inclined to do that, and he'd probably just rather turn up and be crap every week.
So I've heard about termination for cause and termination for convenience. What do they mean in terms of these scenarios?
Yeah, so that's a good point. That's kind of where it was going, actually. So I'm glad you found that in your...
Just a smooth... We just got on that same brainwave, haven't we?
Same brainwave, yeah.
Podcaster.
Yeah, same... Yeah, it's natural for us. Apart from the dodgy mic connections and not knowing which started recording, it's been great. So termination for cause effectively occurs when a party's actions or inactions have caused them to be able to not deliver against the contract. So they've caused the contract to effectively break down. Kind of goes to those material things we were talking about earlier. They failed, the supplier may have failed or refused to perform part of their actual obligations, resulting in a direct breach of the contract. Yeah, and it's like, I'm trying to think of examples I've seen, and quite often they will include wording that says the supplier may terminate or the purchasing party may terminate without the consent of the other party if a breach occurs. They're just required to give 14 days notice or whatever it is.
So the other person doesn't get to say, wait, hold on a minute, we haven't agreed to this. Or if there's something wrong, then they don't have the right to say,
no,
let's fix this.
Well, there might be in a separate clause or additional wording that says about remedial procedures. So if a data breach occurs, they might have 14 days to remediate and resolve it before I can then trigger the actual termination. So they might have a remedial period built in to basically just recover and kind of make good the issues that they've kind of struggled with. That's the point of negotiation, because for you and I, if someone's committed a data breach, I don't want to give the supplier 14 or 30 days to try and rectify it. I probably want to get out the contract straight away. If it's not a critical contract, I might want to get out straight away to stop any further prevention or prevent any further data issues or leakages, as an example. So that's termination for cause. And then I think you mentioned for convenience, which is a great one. So buyers love termination for convenience, suppliers not so much. It's effectively, how do we end the contract early if we need to? Both parties. Well, sometimes you can only have one party might want the option and the other one might not get the option. But it's the ability to walk away from the contract with X amount of notice. And termination for convenience usually comes with a notice period. So I think the standard practice is probably 30 days. If you're looking at, say, a software renewal, you might be looking at 90 days, which 90 days ahead of renewal, which is quite I'm not sure it's a convenient termination for convenience clause, but it's just something to be mindful of. And the ideal for me is any contract can be terminated at any point with a 14-day notice period, or between 14 and 30, depending on the size of the service.
Yeah. And I think this is where you start to get into stuff like auto renewals as well. There's a lot of stuff like that on software purchasing terms, or for real, I can call them real life people then, but non-procurement people. If you don't cancel your Amazon, if you don't cancel your Amazon account in 7 days, then you get charged 12 billion just for the privilege.
Classic, yeah. Oh, you want a free trial? Yeah, fine. You get 7 days free, and then if you don't cancel it by the end of the 7th day, you're charged $49.99 for the next year or something. It's an interesting one. You're kind of basically setting it up so that you've got an amicable way of exiting the contract should the contract no longer benefit you. It's quite a difficult one. If a supplier is particularly resource heavy or resource intensive, they may say, well, we want a longer notice period because effectively our resources are going to be stood down, and then we're going to be paying them, and they're not going to have any work. If it was a big company, so like a Microsoft and Oracle or someone like that, I wouldn't be buying that as an excuse. I'd be saying, well, you're such big household names. Yeah, you've got loads of other projects, so I'm not buying that. But if it was an SME with 10, 15, 20 people, then that's probably reasonable to assume that they'll take some time to then reallocate their resource.
Yeah, you see companies set up sometimes, don't you? Just basically off the back of one contract, the whole company gets set up to deliver against it. So then you can see why, if that contract was terminated, the company's whole business model, income is going to go. Basically, they need to sort out what's happening with their staff, with their outgoings, etc.
Yeah, you expect a degree of reasonableness when you're agreeing these things. You can't just take everyone to the cleaners. So just thinking, the other kind of important bit is, how do you actually terminate the contract? So we know that the clauses are in there. You've negotiated, let's say, 14 days termination for convenience, suppliers not delivering, so we might want to terminate for cause. What would be your kind of, I'm thinking there's 3 steps. Do you want to have a stab at what they might be to get the contract terminated? Let me give you a hint. So I'm a delivery manager, and I'm said, Luke 10, this supplier is no longer delivering, and I want to get out of the contract. Help.
So would the first step be remediation plans to try and fix the delivery issue, or have we gone past that?
We've gone past that, so
Okay,
there's no
okay.
remedial. We're just termination.
Right. Okay. So I would say I notify them.
So before we notify them, we want to be checking that we have grounds to terminate.
Okay.
Sounds really daft, but every contract is different, and we need to make sure that the contract, well, one, the reason that the delivery managers come up to you with, like, you can't just say, oh yeah, they're shit. Like, you can't just terminate because it says, they're shit.
I don't like them.
They don't like them. Classic. That one happens all the time, doesn't it? So you want to get rid of your stinky supplier. So you basically, you're not going to have grounds to cancel the contract because they stink, but you might have grounds to cancel it if you've got termination for convenience, right? So
yeah, let's
just say, brilliant, we've checked the contract and it's got 30 days.
Great. So then you notify them about your intentions to terminate.
And it's always important to make sure it's written. The contract would normally set out, or should set out, the process for notifying. So they might specify that it has to be written, it has to be an email, or it can be written or an email, or it can be sent over by pigeon or fax or whatever. And you have to make sure that you are following that to the letter. So some contracts will actually call out that email is not an acceptable termination method. So they will say we need it by post, and the notice period counts from when it's signed for. Yeah. So you want to draft your termination notice, and it's really, really important that the notice is clear. So you're saying, pursuant to clause 6.5, we would like to trigger termination for convenience. Consider this our 30-day notice period to contract XYZ between us between both parties. Kind of draft it, make sure it's got your company logo on it and dated and kind of signed by someone with the appropriate authority. And you keep a log of it, and then, like I say, the final step is then making sure it's delivered. The interesting bit is if they are accepting an email as termination, make sure you put read receipt. Is it read receipt? Those pesky things that say confirm you've read or received it. You want to get as much traceability on it as you can, because some suppliers might say, well, I was on annual leave, so I didn't get the notice.
Yeah. Is that a valid excuse then?
No, it shouldn't be. The contract should say, if it is accepting email, it should say which will be triggered from the next working day after the email is received, or within 24 hours. Some companies might say once we have responded to the email with acknowledgement, in which case you probably want to argue that because they could sit on it for months.
Shall we finish up? Well, I don't know if you had anything else, by talking about exit plans, or is that a whole nother episode? Or we could kind of go to the high level maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got something for it, that'd be great. I think for me that covers the core bits of termination, kind of what it is, where it is, where you might find it, and the reasons. Exit plan is certainly something that needs to be documented. Yeah,
and that needs to be done during the life of the contract, and ideally quite early on, because you never know when you're wanting to terminate. So yeah,
and I think that could be a good hint for a future guest that we've got coming on, a very, very successful supplier relationship manager, and someone who's very enthusiastic and kind of knowledgeable around the benefits of having the exit plans discussed and kind of documented probably before the contract's even begun. So I can take that down as a note, and we'll get that guest to speak about it in a few weeks' time.
So I was just wondering if you'd read in the news about this guy who sued the airline company after he lost its luggage. Sadly, he lost the case.
That's good, actually. That's
Try
good.
not to laugh.
I was biting my cheeks. It's awkward because I feel like I can't laugh at your jokes because you don't laugh at mine, and it becomes. I feel a bit petty about it, even though your joke's probably better this time. I did notice on the poll. We dropped a poll about our jokes a few months back, and I think the option that won was they both suck. So
yeah. It was whose is better, and the third option was neither. They're both awful. That probably won.
Send this to someone you know, if you know them and they are in these countries: Qatar, Botswana, and the US of A. They're the three I'm calling out because we've got a few listeners in there. So if you know someone there, send it over to them, or send it to someone who stinks.
Cool. Okay. Well, see you later. Lid flicking widget.
See you later.